Yep.
Hi, I'm Dan, and you're on Raw 12:51 AM. I'm speaking today to Luke Pilot, President of the Warwick Students' Union for 2016-2017. Welcome.
Thanks.
So, Luke, you were President for this year, and then you were Welfare Officer last year.
That's right, yeah.
And you're a psychology graduate from Warwick, so you've been here, 5 years now?
Yeah, 5 years, yeah.
Long time.
Not quite as long as that, apparently.
Yeah, we'll always be here. So how we'll run the interview, I've got a few questions just about you as President, and then maybe shift things up and then look at what kind of things the union has done as a whole, issues, challenges faced, and then we'll just conclude nicely with just kind of where we'll go from here.
Cool.
All right, so first things first, you listed a lot of issues on your campaign manifesto. I think I counted like 24 points or something.
Yeah.
So in the past, what do you think has been the most successful, and what do you think? What's probably your proudest achievement in your past year?
Ooh, tough one. I think there's, it's difficult kind of assessing your successful things you've achieved because there's always things that come up that you don't expect as well, so things you don't account for. But I think probably I kind of pick a bit too. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Probably I think week 0. I
Mhm.
think it was something that I didn't necessarily quite realise we could actually.
Yeah, but that's been going on for a while, that
Precisely.
campaign.
Yeah, it was when that I wasn't involved in much last year with the previous officer team that Isaac and George and Alex worked on a lot. But I'd seen how frustrated they'd been and how glacially slow the university was in terms of decision making. So for us to then actually at the start of the year put in place an action plan that actually was successful was really cool. And then one thing that was kind of not planned, but something that was kind of bound to happen in response to kind of our principles, was stopping attrition for you guys for the coming academic year. That was pretty. It was quite an easy win actually. It was just a case of we anticipated you have to organise demos and protests and all sorts, but it didn't. It was just kind of a case of arguing the case with the university and using appropriate committee structures. But we were pretty ready to go all out protest if need to be. But it was thankfully they listened.
All right. From those, is there anything that's come across as being harder to achieve than you would initially have expected?
So obviously week 0 was very difficult to achieve, and even though we were successful this year, it wasn't easy in itself. There were always constant boundaries, but there were various people in the union and the university who were very helpful on that front. I think it's been difficult. So we're currently doing quite a lot of work on the Wednesday afternoons free stuff, and that's again proving not a quick win, but again we're laying down the groundwork, so I think that's going to provide some success in the future, and that's been really good seeing the work Nat and doing on that. I think it's just kind of any kind of big change you want to bring generally is quite difficult. The decision-making process in the university isn't necessarily conducive to quick changes, and kind of trying to. I think it's probably more around kind of liberation-related stuff, and sometimes around well-being related issues and mental health. It's really difficult to get what you think is quite a big topic, put it down to a short action plan. But there are sympathetic voices and ears in the university, which is the case of couldn't really go after years and years just chipping away at the same thing.
Well, is there an issue with kind of facing with the university in terms of getting it implemented, or is it an issue of getting the student body behind it? Do you see a difference between the two of that?
So it's traditionally easier to get students behind something. And so it was pretty easy to demonstrate that students wanted week 0, for example. It was really easy to demonstrate that students want improvements to the mental health support services, for example. It's probably more difficult to them explain that to university, and I think particularly thinking about kind of mental health services and trying to explain kind of nuances that you need in the services to cater for students from different backgrounds. So students of colour and black students, for example, the differences and the nuances in mental health and how your services can reflect that to help them better. It's difficult explaining that to the university. It can be. I think we're traditionally quite a white university and an issue as well. So kind of showing our members who are not white that we're trying to work for them. It's difficult making sure that we are properly representing them as well. So not assuming as white slabs that we're doing the right thing. And then also just explaining it to the university why this needs to be a thing that they consider. It's difficult making that case and just trying to get, because they're not coming at it from the same background that we are, you know.
Has that been a challenge given that kind of stigma in terms of facing students and getting more students involved with the SU, because there may be a perception that it is predominantly white or predominantly catering to kind of, you know, that particular set of values?
Yeah, I mean, I can't put like a figure on it or any stats on it. I think there's definitely an issue there, and I think we still don't quite understand it. I think we need to think long and hard and really put some kind of provision aside for us to work on what it is. There's this clear barrier, and this clear kind of just a very white image, and it's not just an image, it is a fact that it's a very white institution.
I guess it perpetuates as well, because you have the image and then therefore people don't get involved, then have to change the image.
Yeah, but that's the university and the student union, but we both need to work on that, absolutely.
In terms of working with the university, so you did mention with week 0, you know, this idea of it moving glacially slow, it's, you know, very bureaucratic. Do you see a lot of change that's happened? Perhaps, you know, we had a new vice chancellor now. Has that changed things? You know, so you were involved with the SU last year as welfare officer, you were involved as president. Have you seen any difference in terms of how the university operates, or have you come to realize, or does your experience being welfare officer before aid you in handling the university, handling how it works?
So yeah, definitely. I think Nat would probably agree that I think having both been officers for 2 years, we've definitely been able to apply our knowledge of navigating the university better this year after acquiring the knowledge and then working on it this year. We've definitely become kind of much more adept at kind of policy change and implementing change in the university. There's definitely been changes in how things are running at the university since Stuart came in as the vice chancellor. There's also the new provost, the new registrar. There's been various changes in senior management as a few people coming and going over the last 2 years. And there's a big governance review going on in the university as well, an academic governance review separately as well. So there seems to be a bit of an impetus of how can we speed up, streamline, make the decision-making process more efficient. But I think in institutions as big as the university and institutions that aren't quite as maybe dynamic as students' unions, for example, it's always going to be slower and frustrating. But I think there's a will. I think as a students' union, as a student body, need to keep the pressure on to make that actually follow through.
I mean, one of the issues that comes up every time we have the SU elections is this idea of engagement. You know, how many students are participating in the elections, how many students are involved with the issues. But at the same time, you've mentioned this idea of dynamism between the leadership. But countering that is the idea that, well, you need to know how the university operates, and a lot of these issues are long-term issues. They don't change, you know, within a year. How do you think that can be balanced out in terms of how do you get students who may be disillusioned with the SU to get involved, but at the same time have to caution them and say, well, whatever you want to bring in has to be a long-term plan?
Yeah, I think it probably is a case of expectation management to an extent. It's also something that's been really epitomised with the Week Zero campaign, is the idea of legacy planning. So the only reason Week Zero happened was because successive years of SAM teams have worked on it, and we've embedded the ground we've made, that every team has made over the years, into a consistent, sustainable campaign. So it's that idea of making sure something's got a legacy plan, it's got a succession plan, and you're able to capitalise on that and keep the emphasis there. It's definitely a responsibility, partly of the student body as well, to make sure it's still on the SU's agenda, but obviously it's obviously it's a responsibility on our part as officers to make sure we keep communicating that back as well. There needs to be more two-way back and forth discussion, a better forum for that, which I think our forums do work. It's just not maybe as apparent that they do, and then obviously on us again to make sure we keep that on the university's agenda as well.
So in terms of legacy, what would you think, or what would you want to be your legacy moving on next year?
Legacy. I think things like Week Zero and tuition fee freeze would be quite good things to leave behind. I'd like to have, before I leave, certainly more progress made on things like informing the university strategy on mental health support services, and also on kind of disability and access as well. That's something that I was really interested in last year as well for officer. I think it's even more pertinent now, following there were cuts to disabled students allowance last year as well. So to make sure that there's kind of barriers that aren't as obvious to kind of able students as well, to kind of find them and put them on everyone's agenda. So it's part of raising awareness of it, but then also working with the university to actually dismantle those barriers and become like traditional and then kind of less traditional barriers as well.
How could you explain that a bit?
So the idea of, I think when we talk about our disability, we immediately think about, is there ramp access to this building, for example? And that's definitely a case of this campus is still not fully accessible in that way. It's also the kind of the less physical things like the way a lecturer delivers their teaching. So for a student who has hearing difficulties, for example, or a student who's on the autistic spectrum, certain ways of communication won't work for them as well with another student. So it's about kind of how do we accommodate that in a learning environment, and also things like the classic example of a disabled student may not be as able to go on a year abroad if they're doing a language course, for example. So does that then mean they can't study languages when they come to university? So do we need to change that as a national policy level, or are there things that we can change in the university level to make that better for those students as well?
How do you think the union has changed during your term, maybe compared to last year, or just from your experience working, not even just within Warwick SU, but in terms of how we deal with the NUS, external stakeholders? How do you see any differences that have been made in those 2 years and this past year?
Yeah, I mean, there's differences every year because a lot of it will be dependent on the officer team and how they choose to approach it, and also with probably the staff team behind us as well. So we have a really great staff team here. They're amazing. We definitely see great success in the commercial side of the union as well, and the membership services side of it. The staff, things don't get done without their staff, so it's really great that we have them. We can't thank them enough. But staff change like officers as well, maybe not as regularly, but they do come and go. So it's again about making sure we kind of embed progress they make and knowledge they make into the union before they leave. But we've definitely seen a few staff changes here that have resulted in quite positive energy behind new kind of strategic long-term projects. So assessing some of the things that we already offer and how we can improve that, make it more efficient. So there's quite a few projects going on that we'll hopefully start seeing some results from very soon, particularly the next academic year. So it's a shame I won't be here to see that. But I'll be happy to see what changes do come about from afar. And you mentioned NUS. NUS is the mix of, you have a different officer team here every year, and obviously NUS every year as well. And it's a kind of far bigger, more nebulous union to engage with than a students' union, for example. But it's the same, it's a similar thing again with legacy planning and embedding that kind of succession planning. So we've been lucky enough that a lot of the officers in US this year, it was their second year, so I've known them last year and this year. Same with some of the other members and their engagement with students beforehand as well, particularly for like activist groups, for example. So thankfully we're able to kind of build 2-year-long relationships. Unfortunately, those 2-year-long relationships then come to an end, so we have to do it again. But I think both us and SU and with NUS, we're probably learning ways to engage better. Okay.
Moving on to just kind of the union as in general. Do you have any ideas of how the union could probably approach more engagement with students? So now I've brought this up a few times already, but it seems to be, like I said, an issue that comes up every time. It comes up at the SU elections, comes up at NUS elections. You always have candidates who are saying, the SU, the NUS is so disengaged with student issues. How do you see the engagement trends moving on?
I definitely don't have a definitive answer in terms of a definitive way to fix that. But I think it's a mix of things. So we definitely need to look at like the technology side of it. So we've got our SU app was launched this year, and we've just had a few conversations around what our kind of vision for that is in the future. So it's kind of like we've been dreaming quite big around what we want the app to do. They're quite innovative, and it'll take a long time for it to get there, but it should be. And I think the way that we can deploy the app in terms of like democracy, voting in referenda and elections, in society and sports club elections as well, will be really, really useful. But I think it's probably also just the culture of how do you demonstrate to students that their vote counts, and their vote for a certain officer who is an elected results in a change that they support or agree with. It's about demonstrating that journey more often, I think, and that word of journey has been battered around a lot internally at the SU recently. So we're thinking about that and how we show that in our comms and our marketing.
Is that an issue because, the student journey is finite? You come in, you do your degree, and then you leave. So is that where the hindrance, the block comes from? Because students don't see the journey beyond them graduating, essentially?
Difficult to say. I think one thing that I'm not entirely sure how it works at the unions or at the universities, but this kind of like the alumni network is probably quite useful. We definitely see potentially how alumni networks influence cultures and opinions in certain sports clubs and societies. And we'd love to be able to tap into that and harness that. I think we just don't currently have the kind of the time and the resource to do that. And the university has their own alumni kind of relations department. I think we need to figure out how we engage with them and with that as well, because I think that would be huge, not just in terms of convincing alumni to donate straight to the union or straight to sports clubs or directly to sports club societies, but also in terms of how can we kind of pass messages through them and then back that way, and also pass messages through
ensuring the kind of continuity, I guess.
Yeah, it's something to be figured out, is what I'd say.
Now, obviously, okay, so a year is a finite amount of time. Is there anything that you think, if you had, say, another year or another 6 months, that you would have wanted to prioritize over what's been done this year, or are you quite happy with just what's been accomplished?
That's a really tough question, gosh. Because at the moment I'm just kind of like looking at the end of my 2 years and thinking it's definitely time to leave. It's a good thing, the Education Act, so I can't do more than 2 years. But I think probably the way we do mental health awareness, I'd be interested in looking at that kind of more philosophically in terms of, I think the stuff we've done in the last few years has been really good. We're seeing a lot of student engagement, loads more students talking about it. We're seeing whether we can harness societies and sports clubs in starting those conversations. I think what I want to figure out how to make better, for want of a better phrase, is how you convert awareness into actual practical change and support. How does I think there's a tendency for everyone, this across the world, for people to think, oh, we did that really great awareness campaign.
Yeah,
that's actually not the case. And we do a lot in awareness campaigns around how do we encourage students to look after each other, look after their friends, look after themselves. But it's also going to be about how do we pass that on to the national policy scale, how do we pass it into policy at the university, how do we inform where they should be putting resource, and how we should be applying nuance to it as well. So again, making allowances for that aspect that as a white man I will have a different experience of mental health to someone like a person of colour or disabled student, for example. And equally how that can be reflected in support services, and equally how not to kind of over trivialise mental health through too much awareness, if you know what I mean. There's a tendency for people to think if they're having a bad day, that's about their mental health. It's a different thing. I think mental health and well-being are two different things, and we're potentially conflating them and losing that meaning. So we need to kind of make sure when we're doing awareness, it's awareness of your well-being and your mental health is on a spectrum. Absolutely recognise when you're going against different parts of that, when your friends and family against different parts of that. Equally, there's a difference between kind of a pathological side of it. I think we need to kind of not lose sight of the kind of science side of it as well. But it's very difficult to figure that out. I think, and for now, I think that the awareness side of it is really good.
That'll be the initial step. Precisely. But it's ensuring that continues to.
And we need to keep harnessing that knowledge, realise how far we've come, and then keep developing it further instead of just staying on the same note. What your question?
Yeah, better question. So you mentioned earlier about with the tuition fee rise. You mentioned the principles of the SU, but last term we had the part-time environmental ethics officer stepping down, and he cited political differences. So do you think there's room for these kind of political ideology, personal political leanings within the SU, and how does that come to work with kind of the greater, goal of the SU as a whole?
So, I think we have to recognise there's a difference in terms of political leanings of individuals and then of the union as well. So, obviously, the union's an inherently political institution, and then there are certain things that are policy. So like for education, it's policy of the students' union, and until it either lapses or someone campaigns for it to lapse early, it will continue to be policy of the union. So that is a value of the union. And if your principles, politics, beliefs clash with the principles, politics, beliefs of the union, then I'm slightly less sympathetic. I think in that instance when Sam resigned, I think we would probably disagree over what his motivations were for resigning. And it was a shame. I think Sam could have been really good in the role, we will always seek to have debate, discussion, hence, when policy is passed, it's voted not on by more than just me and my fellow sabbatical officers. It's every student has the right to do that, to participate in that vote. And we'll always seek to have debate because disagreement is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We'll always want, a particular example which keeps coming up is week 0, where there were, you'd assume that every student would agree with the concept of week 0. Not every student did, and we had to have the discussions with those students, see why. It helps us kind of reinforce our ability to argue for week 0, and it also made us sometimes double check what tactics and what route we would take and what path we were taking to win it, and to make sure we were keeping as many members on side as possible. But I think in terms of inclusion in the union because of your views, I mean that's the whole point of the union, is that we host space for debate. But we'll always, unless you're a fascist, we're never going to say that you can't be part of this. But if your political beliefs or principles or values are advocate, for example, the destruction of a union, which in the case of a students' union actually saves students' lives in some cases, then I don't think it's a place for you. I'm not sympathetic.
So on to easier questions.
Yeah.
What are your plans after this?
So nothing set in concrete yet. Essentially looking for something with a little less responsibility for now, a little less intensive and stressful. So my long-term plan is to become a counselling psychologist, helping people with poor mental health. But that involves doing a doctorate, and that involves finding a way to fund it, and that involves various other kind of smaller qualifications before it. So that's kind of the start of my long, 10-year journey to qualification. Yeah.
Alright. You've been here 5 years, so what would be your biggest piece of advice, personally, as a student, for incoming students in Warwick, undergrad, postgrad, anyone?
Okay, so I think obviously there's different kind of demographics and types of students and different barriers and different motivations for being here. I think there are a few things that I'd always recommend. So get involved. My advice to prospective students on open days is always be looking at societies and sports clubs. Come and do something that you already do. Do something that you've always wanted to do but never have, and do something that you never heard of before. There's no shortage of things to do. So please come and occupy your time, and you will find yourself growing and developing in ways that you hadn't planned. But as I say, you always ask for help if you need it. Be that in your studies, be that personally with your health, for example. Don't ever be ashamed to ask for help. It's really important to do so. And give a damn as well. I think it's been really frustrating to encounter apathy from students, and we've been campaigning on various issues. And I appreciate there's a lot of stuff going on. There's not a lot of time between your seminar and your lecture to think about how climate change is going to affect stuff every day. But when things like on a national and local scale are impeding students and disempowering, disenfranchising students, it's really important for you to be engaged and to think about that, and to be thinking about the rising tuition fees, the cost of your accommodation, whether the postgraduate who's teaching you a seminar is being paid fairly, that kind of thing. Like those things are so important to have students interested in behind. And if you're not fully equipped on the knowledge behind it, equip yourself, educate yourself. The kind of most fantastic and best education is that self-taught aspect, and empowering yourself to go and teach yourself and learn about something is so powerful. And knowledge is power. So get involved, ask for help if you need to, and give a damn.
Alright, I think that sums it up pretty well. Thank you for joining us today.
No worries, thanks for having me.
Alright.